We are now a couple of weeks into the ARCHAZIA'S Island metagame, and there has been quite a few meta developments since that opening weekend where Sapphire Steel appeared to just dominate the field. If you watch my video since then, you know I said don't panic. Sapphire Steel is not a tier 0 deck, and I think we have seen that develop. Of course, there's a lot of flexibility in this meta, and we're going to take a look at two big tournaments in this video. The big CCS 13K that happened over this past weekend, March 23rd, I believe, 22nd, 23rd, and the Hunter Burton Memorial that also occurred the week prior. These are important events because not only are they rather large, I know they're American, and there's obviously a couple of European big tournaments as well, but a lot of great players show up to these events as well, and it's really good to see what they're on in the metagame, what adaptations they've made. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this one since it is a little bit old, but we do see in the top 8 4 Emerald Steels and only 2 Ruby Sapphire, 1 Ruby Sapphire, and then the winner, the single Sapphire Amethyst. And I've talked about this before, saying basically we're in a triangle meta where you have Sapphire Steel, you have Ruby Sapphire, and you have Amethyst Steel as pretty much the top decks in the format. And Amethyst Steel, again, if you watch my deck profiles and stuff, I said the deck is pretty much the same as previous sets with the introduction of the newest card, the Dual Ink Giant Cobra. This card does a lot for this deck. You could play it a number of different ways, right? You could play Honey Marriage, you could not. This build by Steven here goes very heavy on the 1-drops. Calhoun for extra lore gain, right? With the challenges, you're not really too worried about aggro decks, and Calhoun is pretty bad into Sapphire Ruby, but other than that, it's a fantastic card still. And then the big thing is the 3 Benjas. You can see White Roses, Genies. These cards were at historic lows, and I was telling my friend, when they're $7-8 Canadian, I would pick up extra copies because this card, yes, it was overhyped, right, for sure. And I think we saw that towards the end of the metagame last set. But it's not a bad card. It's still a good card. And in this list, you can see for an aggro-oriented list where red, blue, or Ruby Sapphire is not as popular, and Ruby Amethyst is basically fallen out of the meta for now. It'll probably come back in a certain capacity. Genies will thrive. When there's no Ruby or not a lot of Ruby decks at the top of the meta, Genie is an insane card. This card does it's a good counter, basically. It does a lot against the Steel matchups because Steel basically needs Zeus or a wide board with strength in order to out it, right? They don't really play too many other things that can directly deal with this card off the top of my head that I can think of. So this card likely comes down, puts a lot of pressure on the opponent, forces them to make some awkward plays and throws off their curve, while in the meantime you're just developing a bigger board, quest heavy board that we know Sapphire Steel and stuff will struggle to deal with wide boards, and then you have the passive lore gain or non-questing lore gain. And this is why this deck was a great counter pick and was able to win this event. I'm not gonna, you could take a look at some of these Emerald Steels. There were some interesting ones. I think there was a pirate one. I think it was this one. Daisy Duck Pirate with the John Silver. This card, I'm telling you, this is a sleeper card. This card is really good as we get more and more locations. I know we didn't get any in ARCHAZIA'S Island. But yeah, Seven Dwarfs Mine and Hidden Cove, right? With the Platinum wiping out all the items, it puts the Sapphire decks really behind. The Pete has proven to be an absolutely fantastic card. This card, non-foil, is like $1 or $2. And I've called this out before. I would pick up copies if you don't have this while it's this cheap. It is a great card. I overlooked it a little bit in my set review back at the beginning of the set, but the fact that it shifts on this Pete, the fact that it gives this me resist, the fact that it quests for 2, it's a shift 4. You could play it with Morph, which some Emerald Steel lists are playing since they play the Diablo lines and maybe Beast Tragic Heroes still. Like I said, it quests for 2, it's a 5/5 body, it's difficult to out, and then it prevents people from singing their songs, or your opponents from singing their songs when this character is exerted. There's a lot that this card does. I picked up 4 foil ones. They've spiked a little bit since, but I picked them up for around $7 Canadian. It's a great card if you ever plan to play Emerald Steel. I think it will be a staple moving forward because we know that this Pete will be a staple. It's literally one of the best cards in the game. So, yeah, any synergy you get with this, if you're playing Emerald, obviously, because this is a dual ink, you will probably play Pete in every iteration of Emerald Steel, whether it's Pirates or Discard or whatever it might be, right? So yeah, really interesting lists there. The defending champion almost won twice in a row in Aaron Rubin. I think that's Lorcana, bro. And their list is the Oswald list. Notably, they're also on Queens, so they must be on a very large item package, 19, so a little bit more than usual. A lot of these items, almost actually all of these items except for the Lucky Dimes, get hit off the Queen, and of course the Lucky Dimes can hit off Oswald, but you just have so much like firepower to get free items into play with the Queen and the Oswald. So interesting take on this build. The 2 workshops I definitely agree with. I think 3 is probably too much. I was testing 3, and I really only found you'd ever only want 1 in rotation anyways, because you're not really paying an extra 2 to draw 2 for the most part. You need your ink for other interactions, so you don't want to brick on these. I think 2 is fine. And then 3 dimes, if you want to hit them and just see them and get them into rotation fast enough so that you can quest with your Tamatoa, which are playing out early thanks to the ramp. Like, yeah, you want to see Lucky Dime either in your hand, either off of the Queen or off of the Oswald. So yeah, that was a tournament that was from a little while ago, but interesting to see the meta progression. And then we have a complete shift in the metagame, in my opinion, when we look at this. What was this? It was supposed to be an 8K, then a 10K, and then it ended up being a 13K. So showing that the game is growing, which is great. 319 players, like that's crazy. And we know DLCs are always capped out. So yeah, I did watch some of this stream, and Hector Heras with Sharknado ended up taking it. We do see a move back to more traditional Ruby Sapphire, which is very interesting. But yeah, this top 8, very, very, I won't say very diverse, but pretty interesting overall. Again, you see, yeah, basically, yeah, what I've been saying for a while, right? Ruby Sapphire, Sapphire Steel, and Amethyst Steel are the only decks that made top 8, aside from one, Ruby Amethyst, which came out of nowhere. Definitely wouldn't have pegged this deck to be a top deck, but congrats to Zeke the Beast for making top 4 with it. I will say I do think Emerald Steel has a shout in this metagame, and I've already talked about Emerald Amber potentially being an anti-meta pick, but it is really niche, and like when you look at these discard decks these days, their power level is just a step behind the Sapphire decks, right? And that's pretty obvious, as you can see by the breakdown of the top 8s of these major events, because these Sapphire decks are just so much more efficient and so much more consistent, right? The discard decks are still very powerful, and if they get their lines of play, they're almost unbeatable. But if they brick 2 out of the 3 games or don't see an ideal line of play, and then as a Sapphire player you're more likely to set up your stuff, you just outrace them and outgas them, and they just can't do enough to come back. So that's one of the reasons why I think the discard decks are maybe like a tier below, but good anti-meta picks. But the 3 decks I've talked about, Amethyst Steel, Sapphire Steel, and Sapphire Ruby, are definitely the top decks in the format. I want to start off though looking at this Ruby Amethyst, because I did not see this player play, unfortunately. But when we take a look at this list, we are seeing the Queen of Hearts as one of the new cards in the deck. This card is another great card. It is a 2-cost 1/4, so similar to like Ursula on the Amber side, right? That's a Singer 4. What does this card have going for it? Well, it quests for 1, but while this character has damage, she gets +3 strength, making her a 4/4 that comes down for 2. And why this card is good, in my opinion, is because it's good into the Sapphire meta, or the Sapphire Steel meta, I should say, because it's not going to get Storm Raged. It's not going to get Strength, most likely. Like, no one's going to waste a Zeus on this. So it's a good card to just come down, contest the board. Being 4 willpower also contests into Bell, right, and survives. It can contest potentially into, well, it can contest into this Scrooge as well, even though it gets traded out in that instance. And of course, it has to have damage on it to do that. So this trades out evenly with Bell because it has damage on it already to get the +3 strength, and it trades out evenly with Scrooge, but on 2. And it's crazy to say, like, Bell and Scrooge, like, they're free, right? And you're still paying 2 for this Queen of Hearts. That's how good Bell and Scrooge are, right? It's crazy. But there's a lot of interactions where this is nice. And yeah, I mean, you can throw this into something, pressure your opponent to making, or not making awkward plays, but trying to play around this card to a certain extent. If you say the Scrooge is a 4/4 that you play for free, well, this is a 4/4 I play for 2. It's pretty good in that sense. I mean, the Scrooge does get an item as well, which is, that card is, I don't know how people didn't see that that card was going to be good, and like why it was pre-ordering so cheap. But whatever, I've already talked about that many times. But the Queen of Hearts does a lot in the 2-drop slot now. You don't have to rely on Flynn Rider, which is very vulnerable to Storm Rage, right? Which is very popular, obviously, in the Sapphire Steel lists. You're on 2 Madam Mim Snake, so not a lot of 2-drops, right? Depending on potentially the 1/1-drop into double 1-drop on turn 2. But even so, you're only on 11 1-drops, 5 2-drops, and 4 Crabs. I've talked about Crab, and I do think Crab is a massively underrated card. Crab with the Queen of Hearts, also fantastic, right? Instantly boosted to a 4/4, and then it basically becomes a permanent 4/4, right? Because you challenge with the Queen, it takes damage. Now the +3 strength stays on it, and it goes 2 for 1 because it trades out another character. The Crab also boosting up Diablos and Mims potentially on the not crackback, but on the follow-up play. You know, just a fantastic card. Comes out of nowhere. Your opponent can't always factor in, like, well, what if he has Crab, right? If you have it, it's such a surprise. Sometimes it can really swing board states. It's really, really impactful. And the fact that it's just a 3/3/3 and it can sing friends is just so nice as well. Sisu, another 1/4, similar to Queen of Hearts, right? Only 3 copies though. Just a great pressure card on the board, and unlike Queen of Hearts, this one does quest for 2. And then 2 Genie, 2 Rabbits as a split. Again, Genie showing its worth in a steel-oriented meta. This is a card that replaces itself. Your opponent has to waste a Zeus interaction on it most likely, and otherwise it's very hard to steal to out. So really good for that. Of course, 4 Goats, 3 Mauis, only 2 Brawls, which is understandable because in the Sapphire, in the Sapphire Ruby deck, yes, you play 4 because you have ways to reduce strength. In Ruby Amethyst, this card is actually like a little bit lesser value because when you think about some of the most important cards in the game right now, like Belle on the Sapphire Steel side, a lot of the Ruby Sapphire cards that they play are not weak to Brawl. And again, a lot of the cards, pretty much all of the cards at the Sapphire Steel list, except for like maybe Oswald if they're even on that build, play are not weak to Brawl either. Like, it doesn't deal with the Scrooge, doesn't deal with Grammatala. Yes, it deals with Hiram, but if they play Maurice's Workshop, like, again, if you've tested, you're inking your Hirams. If you have a Workshop in play sometimes, like, you're like, yeah, I've already went through 1 or 2 Hirams. I don't need to play another one. It's just tempo loss for me now. I can just draw 2, right, by playing 2 1-cost items. I get more items in rotation, which is what I want. I pay 1 with the Workshop, so maybe I pay 4 ink total, which is similar to Hiram, and I draw 2 cards still, and I develop my items. Instead of Hiram coming down, banishing an item, and yes, I get a body that can potentially quest again, but like the Workshop is just really, really efficient, which is interesting because I do know Workshop is being cut from certain lists. Because again, Workshop is slow, but if you do set it up, it is very powerful, and we saw that from previous streams and tournaments that happened at the beginning of the meta. 2 Dragonfire, good way to deal with the new Tamatoa, and 4 Be Prepared, right? This action package here showing that they're not afraid of the Steel Pete, and then the big surprise, like generic locations, and we saw that in the Emerald Steel list, right? I think Nottingham, I think, is the name of the location on the Steel side. That's pretty much the exact same as Forbidden Mountain here. A 2-cost inkable 6 willpower location that just gains 1 lore. 4 of the Fairy Ship, similar to, again, Neverland on the Amber side, and then 4 Library. Probably the best location in the game now, I would say. Well, this and McDuck Manor for sure are contesting for the best locations, just because of how you can build around these cards. Very, very strong. So yeah, very interesting list. I don't know what to say about these locations. I guess they just put on enough pressure that this player, again, was able to just push through opponents' boards. And we all know locations with Ruby removal is very powerful, right? That's how Dinka Fam's list won DLC Melbourne, and his deck has kind of now become a mainstay of the format, which is really cool to see. So yeah, that was the Ruby Amethyst list. Very, very interesting. We have Jonathan Lamb, who is known for playing Sapphire Steel, and another player making top 8 with Sapphire Steel. Only 2 Sapphire Steels, with Ruby Sapphire stealing the show with half of the representation in Top Cut. So let's take a look at Irish Willie first. Okay, this is the aggro list of Sapphire Steel, which is interesting to see make the top cut. I have experimented with a list like this with Dwarf Mine and running the Dwarf package, and it does okay. But yeah, congratulations to this player. Obviously pilots it very well to make top 8. I played it in, like, not this exact list, but I've tried something similar, and I just found that maybe I just wasn't good with it. It just seemed like I would just get run over if I didn't win the game too quickly. Which maybe that's just how the deck plays, or maybe I should be playing it more efficiently. I don't know, but I just find these aggro decks can be a little underwhelming. To be fair, like I wasn't on like Baymax and Bianca's, and maybe those cards are some of the difference makers because, like, as you go to the mid to end game, these are cards that could come down and put a lot of pressure on opponents. Maybe like if you're a little bit too low to the ground, like once you get to a certain point in the game, like your cards just get blown out by the ruby stuff, right? Whereas Bianca is a lot harder to deal with. I mean, if the Sapphire ruby opponent is set up with like double coil or fishbone coil, right, and they can ink twice in a turn and stuff, like your Bianca's still getting blown out by any strength based removal. Regardless, though, it's still a very powerful card. You play this for 4. You're not ramping at all in this deck. You're just straight aggro, and then Baymax is a non-questing source of lore, which can help heal Pluto. Like, I tested this when Baymax came out too, in the previous set. Like, I like the Baymax, but again, that 2 strength is very vulnerable. If it does survive, though, I don't want to say you win the game, but like it's a good chance that you can do a lot of damage. It heals up to Lawrence as well, giving him back the 4 strength. It's just a nice card overall. 4 Storm Rage, 4 strength as standard removal. It's almost like this is an adaptation of Amber Steel Mine, right? Because you still got the song package. You're just doing it with a better singer now than Cinderella, which is like crazy to say, right? Remember when Cinderella came out and we were like, yeah, this Cinderella Storm combination is kind of broken, and it remained that way for like several sets. Now we have an even better interaction with the bell. Well, I mean, I don't know if I call it better. Like if you get it set up, it's better, right? But you do need the item plus the bell and the song, but that's usually not too hard to do. And no Hurums in this list either. Just goes to show you the power of these redraw items, right? Just you might even use them for their abilities. Again, I didn't see this player play on stream, so I can't really comment too much on this deck. I do know how the general aggro strategy works, I believe, but maybe I don't know. Maybe they don't play it as an aggro deck. I mean, I'm assuming they do, but like, yeah, you go aggressive. You have to be playing it as an aggro deck. You wouldn't play Alice otherwise, right? Yeah, the Pluto is really nice though. I think this card got a lot of hype and then it kind of fell off, but this card is very good. Like this card is a problem for a lot of decks to deal with. Yeah, I think this card is kind of slept on. If you don't have foils and you want foils, if they're like $3 or $4 now, because I know they were up to like $10 originally, like in Canadian dollars again. So if you're a US, adjust. But I would pick up foils for around $3 if I didn't have them already. Like that's just me though. It's a really good card, and it synergizes really well with Amber and with Sapphire, right? With the healing aspects, and I think we probably like and again, like when you look at the identity of those colors, right? Like they're gonna get more healing cards and more powerful healing cards as we get more power creeps. So the card is bound to become like really good, unless we get a power creeped Pluto, which I don't think we would. Or we will. Next up, let's take out Jonathan Lamb. He's probably, on a traditional version because he's been playing standard. Even with the wheel, like you don't even see wheel anymore. But, I don't know why I'm calling it. Yeah, it's Jonathan Lamb, right? Lamb Chops. J Lamb, just one of the OG OG Sapphire Steel players. On the 2, Jim Hawkins. Okay, interesting. Force Me, 4 Tipo, 3 Bell, 4 Pete, 2 of the first chapter Bell. What is this? Strange but Special, I believe was her name. Yeah, Strange but Special. 4 Hiram, 3 Cogs, which it's funny because Cogsworth is either like completely dead, like into the Ruby matchups. Well, not I wouldn't even say Ruby matchups. I mean, yeah, because it'd be prepared, but like especially obviously into Ruby Sapphire because of the Sisu. But against the steel decks, I don't want to say auto win, but he's very good into the steel decks. So if you're going up against like a mirror match and you have Cogsworth and they don't, you're in pretty good shape. 1 Ariel, okay, 2 Bianca's, only 2 Tamatoa Habi's a Clam, which is wild. I think this card should be at least 3 or 4, but J-Lam better deck. I mean, he knows the deck inside out, so I'm never going to question him. But for me personally, I don't understand the logic why you would play less of this card. I mean, I guess, it's a good card. I mean, it's a 4/5 body for 6. Well, I mean, so is the Tinkerbell, but the Tinkerbell checks aggression. I don't know. Like for me, it just seems this card facilitates your Lucky Dime so much more. Whereas Tinkerbell always felt a little dead into the Ruby matchups for me. Maybe I just don't have enough experience with it because I haven't played with Tinkerbell in a while. But I'd be curious to know why this ratio. Like, are you that fearful of aggro decks running you over? I would be more protect towards the other Sapphire decks, which maybe this is an option for. Maybe this is another card that cooks the mirror match. I haven't tested this one out. So it's a really interesting option to see Tinkerbell in this list. And I'm happy to see these first chapter cards still seeing play. 1, King Arthur. I think this card is fantastic as a surprise option. You have 4 Fishbones, so you're not really too worried about the uninkable counts here. The 1 of Hades is nice too. 2 of the big Tamatoa. This is not a card you need to see, because like, to be honest, you probably prefer to see Ariel with the dime over this Tamatoa. But you have to play this Tamatoa just because it is your other big option if your Ariel gets outed. The Twin Fire is very interesting. Deal 2 damage to chosen character. Then you may discard a card, deal another 2 damage, which is really good value when you pair it with a Whole New World. Dump your hand faster, get extra value, clear the board out, and then sing a Whole New World, right? And when you take a look here, right, being able to play Bianca on 4 for her to sing a Whole New World on 5. Obviously, Cogsworth can sing a Whole New World. If you're ramping with Tipo or with the Fishbone, you can still develop a character to sing the Whole New World. Any of these characters do from the Cogsworth on. And yeah, you can just get good value, similar to how Steel Song gets value. No actual songs in the decks aside from the Let It Go, which is at a 2 of. So paired with the Hades, those are your only forms of removal. Well, I guess you could say Grab Your Swords is also in there. But for dealing with readied characters, the Tinkerbell can deal 1 damage, but it's probably not enough. And the Grab Your Swords as well. 3 Fortisphere, 4 Popsicle, 4 Fishbone, and 2 Lucky Dime. Very interesting ratios from Jonathan Lamb on 62 cards. So really struggling to find the room to play the cards that you want to play probably. 2 Visions as well in combination with a Whole New World. Maybe can be a little awkward, but I think, like, when you think of, if you've actually played these decks, which I've played Sapphire Steel a decent amount, not like this level or this much into this meta, like this kind of variation, but there are times where you're like, I don't want a Whole New World because I don't want to give you cards. And if your opponent knows you're on a Whole New World, they're like, well, he has the Whole New World, that's his card draw engine. And you're like, no, I don't really have to do that. Maybe I just ink my Whole New Worlds off Fishbones, make you play so that you think that I'm going to Whole New World, so you try to play into the Whole New World, but then I can just find my options with Vision. So like, there's cool little like psychological aspects you can put onto this, which I think is really interesting. So yeah, shout out to Jonathan Lamb for making top 8 there on this event. And oh man, yeah, these Ruby Sapphire decks. I do think Ruby Sapphire is still the best deck of the format, but we'll see how things continue to develop. We got Purple Steel here, also making top 8. I think this player and this deck finished higher in the Swiss rounds. I think they were top 4, top 3 maybe in Swiss, but then unfortunately losing out in top 8. And the list is, again, just a pretty straightforward aggro list. Unfortunately, like, it's understandable why they would not get further, because you have 4 Ruby Sapphire decks in the top 8, and you face up against any of those Ruby Sapphire decks, like, you're getting cooked, because the Calhoun is pretty much dead in that matchup. I don't want to say pretty much dead, but like, it has very limited value compared to other matchups. Your genies get instantly blown out by like everything, Sisus, brawls. I mean, I went through this last set when I even commented on it. I was like, as an Amethyst player, or as a Ruby Sapphire player too, like, whenever I played Ruby Sapphire and Amethyst players developed genies against me, there was a time where like they like, it was like 5 days straight of like a couple matches, no genie quested on me. I always had the answer to the genie. And this is before Sapphire Coil, right? I just always had the brawl, the big Sisu, whatever. Well, ice blocks were played then, and ice block it down, then small Sisu it away. Like, it's really tough to get your genie to do something into the Ruby Sapphire matchups. But when you're not in a Ruby heavy meta, it's a pretty good card, right? I already talked about this earlier in this video. Your only forms of removal and for songs is the strength and 4 Cobra. Like, this card is insane. Cobra is, like, it's one of the best cards in the set for sure. So you're playing like just really, really strong cards in Amethyst Steel. You got Pete, you got 4 Crab as well. I talked about the value there. You get extra value off your Dock too, turning it into a 4/3. You get value off your Calhoun here. And the reason like Calhoun is still not good is because you're not doing a lot of challenging in the, well, I guess I shouldn't say you're not doing a lot of challenging, because like the Huram still has to turn sideways, but then you let Huram turn sideways, like, you don't want it to draw 4. That's kind of rough. But, you know, Calhoun instantly taking out Hiram with the crab boost is kind of nice. These kind of interactions. And you just try to race, right? White Rose, goats, bouncing. And then you have some disruption with the Benja, which you can bounce. You play this on critical items, but you know, if you're going to see in these Ruby Sapphire lists, they're not item oriented really. They're not like the 20 plus items, which in that case it's hard to even choose what you blow up. Do you blow up the Maurice's Workshop, the Lucky Dime probably if it's there? Like it's tough. With that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the Ruby Sapphire lists here. So this one again, pretty traditional, very traditional actually. The only new card is the Sapphire Coil and the Tamatoa, not even playing the Scrooge. On the Maleficent Dragons, back on the Mauis, even putting in Cusco's for those Sapphire Mirrors. Afraid of those McDuck Manors, no doubts, but also hitting Lucky Dimes as well. One Greystone Dragon, no Oswald or anything, so you're just raw playing these cards out. One Lucky Dime, 4 Big Sisu, and no Be Prepared. Just going all in on Sisu wiping, Maleficent control. No Fishbone. So your ramp is the Tipo and the Sail. And then you have to try to get up to this level, which, you know, the player made top 8, so they obviously did that a number of times. Very strong. Traditional, I'm going to call it traditional Ruby Sapphire, which it's crazy because you can literally just take the old list, slot in some Tamatoas, the new ones, and the deck is just insanely better. And obviously Sapphire Coil. Like, there is something to take note of. And I think a lot of people are writing off Ice Block, and you're hearing it here first. Ice Block is not a completely dead card. I'm not 100% sure if it makes its way back into the deck, but there is a case to be made that you still would play Ice Block. And I don't know if you'd still play 4 Coils, because like Coil is insanely good. The issue is you have to continually ink for Coil to trigger. And if you've played matches with this deck, you know there are times where you're like, I don't want to ink any card in my hand right now. Like, I have 3 cards in my hand that are all super valuable, but I need to ink because I need to trigger these Coils. Whereas if I had Ice Blocks or, you know, 1 Ice Block or something, I could just Ice Block this down. Like, it's weird. It really depends. It's like a huge meta call whether or not you play that or not. You know, this player on Medusa, Brawls, Big Sisu as their forms of strength-based removal, and Little Sisu. So, like, the Coil does a lot to be able to reduce things by 2, but you have to keep inking. And your only draw engine is Hiram. You don't have workshops. You don't have anything else, right? Like, the Vision will help you find Hiram, sure. The Tamatoa reviving Popsicle is really great because you have this Tamatoa and this Tamatoa. So, like, the deck gets a lot, right, with just the new cards. Sail is still a cantrip, but I think that you still might struggle a little bit with this version just because you really do need to see the cards that you need to see, which I guess you could say about any deck, but maybe it's what I'm trying to say is like it's maybe a little bit harder to see it in a deck like this. But obviously that player made it work, so huge congrats to them. The next list is basically, again, yeah, like a Shark list. Not quite like Dinkafam's super aggressive list, but more of a, again, traditional last set list where there were Pirates' Lives, Maui Sharks. You see Tipo, Grammatala, again, no Scrooge, not on an item-heavy version. Hideaway as a 2 of, right? Recurable with Shark as well. Sail, so this one's obviously going to be action-heavy because of the Maui. And item-wise, you got 2 Vitalosphere, Popsicle, Coil, Stone Dragon, and 2 Lucky Dimes, which 2 Lucky Dimes seems odd. You know, I think you just want 1. How many uninkables are you on? 13. I guess you can afford to play 2. Because, yeah, I mean, you see it in your hand, you quest with this Tamatoa, and you drop it. And like I said, 3 to 4 Tamatoas. I don't think you need to play 4 in every instance, but, yeah, well-balanced deck in my opinion. A low uninkable count. Still on the B preps. You've got the cards you need to win every game. You've got countermeasures in the Pirate's Life, the clawback lore. You know what's crazy? Is I've been thinking about the 7-drop Chapter 1 Aladdin in these Ruby Sapphire lists as well. I mean, that thing comes down. It can sing Be Prepared. But you usually just want to challenge something and gain 2 lore, take away 2 lore, because a Pirate's Life is basically Aladdin on, Aladdin is a Pirate's Life on a body. That was the original Pirate's Life, right? Of course, you have to challenge, but like with Vitalosphere, because of Sharks, like maybe you go up with more Vitalospheres, then you have more targets to use this with the Aladdin and the Shark, and then it makes the Aladdin a 7/5, as well. Not that that really matters for anything. I guess maybe for like Tamatoa. But giving it rush and just having it go in there right away, gain 2 lore, claw back 2 lore, and then maybe sing Pirate's Life with something else. Like that's a 4 lore, well 8 lore swing and 4 lore in each direction, right? For +4 for you, -4 for your opponent. That's huge. I don't know, something to consider, but maybe it doesn't have legs. Because I was thinking about like using that Aladdin with like the Poisoned Apple as well. Because you can constantly recur Poisoned Apple with this Tamatoa, with both of these Tamatoas. But then you probably want to go back to like the unconventional tools. So you could play the Poisoned Apple for 1 instead of 3, which means you probably put Bells back into this deck, so you have more ways to banish the unconventional tool in addition to Hirams. But then you can also make a case to say I play Judy Hopps, which has a dual purpose, because I can banish my own card to draw a card and then get the benefit off tool, and then I can also use it as a utility option to banish my opponent's card. So, there's a lot of things you can cook up with these lists. It's pretty cool. But yeah, Lucas there on second place. You got Logan, third place. You got Logan in second place here. There, what I just say, Ice Block, right? I like this option from Logan. I think this is a smart choice because there are times where you don't want to ink and you're like, maybe Ice Block, depending on the matchup, depending on the meta, what cards are relevant, maybe Ice Block is enough for me to get mileage off of it. They are on an item heavy version, no Shark, right? So they're on the Scrooge, which I don't want to say I like it better because I do like the versatility that Shark gives you, but I don't know. You're seeing Maldragons also coming back into these decks, which is really cool. Card is just so good, right? Like you're playing only 2 Fishbones, but like if you're playing Fishbone and you have the other ramp options and Tipo Sail, which Logan is going full in on here. He says, nah, I'm not super high on items. I mean, yeah, 17 is pretty good still, but I'm not depending on Fishbone for being my ramp. The Tipo and the Sail are the cards you want to hit. 3 Vitalis Sphere. No Aladdin, no Shark. Card is good, man. I like this list. The only thing I may not agree with is the double Lucky Dime, but that's just from my testing, which again is not nearly as high level as these guys. So if they're on 2 dimes, I understand, but I did cut 1 from my list. I also didn't like the Great Stone Dragon, but I can definitely understand. Like I have played it and it has been good when I see it, but sometimes it just feels too slow. I guess in those instances, if you do see it, you just ink it anyway, so it's not really too much of a liability. And in matchups where it's good, like the mirror match, again, I'm probably just not playing enough matches to really generate the benefit of seeing the value of that card fully. Like it is good when you get it in rotation in the mirror, especially. You can just outrace your opponent, out ink them, out resource them. And all it takes is like you don't have to keep this around and ink every turn off of it. Like you just get a couple of inks off of it, and then you're just that much further ahead of your opponent. So yeah, really cool list. I like it a lot. 4 vision. Okay, instead of the workshops. Again, no workshops to be seen yet, by the way. Not even in the Sapphire Steel lists. So, I was talking about workshops a lot in the beginning, and you can kind of see people are moving off the workshop. It is slow. And in a meta where you want to be fast, the meta eventually develops faster and faster, right? These slow cards get cut, right? These RNG cards get cut. Oswald's, etc. They get cut. Yeah, because I think Zan was at this event, actually. And do they have his list? No, they don't. Oh, wait. Show all 25? We do not have Zans, but we got No I'm Not. Look what you made me do. You made him move off of Ruby Amethyst. No Oswald in the Sapphire Steel. Everyone's back on these Cuscos, man. Everybody's on these Cusco. So this is basic. Yeah, 3 Last Cannon. This is another card that I talked about with the Shield of Arendelle. I was like, either Last Cannon or Shield can be good depending on the meta. This card making Bell a 6-3 could be really good. Making Pete a 6-3, making Tipo a 4-2, right? Making Scrooge a 7-4. Cusco a 6-3 or 6-5, sorry. But yeah, it definitely is a card that is worth looking at for sure. Yeah, I like this list. Unfortunately, he didn't make top 8, but it looks like a pretty decent list. I wonder how his matches went or what he would opt to change. But yeah, I wanted to look at Zan's list because obviously Zan and Jeremy helped pioneer the whole Oswald tech thing, in my opinion. And I think at least Zan was off of it because I saw he was on stream for a couple of matches. But anyways, let's get to the big one, Sharknado. So the Shark list ends up taking the event, proving the versatility here. A Pirate's Life with the 4 Shark, 3 Tamatoa, 3 Sisu, 2 B Preps, 1 Hideaway. Again, no Scrooge and no Workshop. So again, just a fast list. Going back to what Ruby Sapphire was before. 3 How Far I'll Go, 1 Let It Go. Only 3 Sapphire Coil. No Ice Block to compensate out. But 3 Vitalosphere again. Yeah, like I'm telling you guys, this card is... When this card first came out, I was like, this card is probably going to be underrated. It's a... Like, there's more and more characters that you want to give Rush to. And in a Sapphire Ruby deck that synergizes so well with items already, this card is insane. Like I said, like I'm already trying to think about what cards in Ruby do I want to initiate challenges for, right? But like I'm not gonna go over it again. But like Poisoned Apple comes to mind, and then reoccurring it with Tamatoa and doing all this stuff. Notice that there are no big Tamatoas and there are no Lucky Dimes in this list as well, by the way, which is again kind of harking back to what we saw last format, where Lucky Dimes were cut and then Ruby Amethyst became a thing, and then Lucky Dimes started to be put back into these decks. This guy is just all gas, which is why I'm saying, like, with the Lucky Dime lists, because we saw Workshops get cut now, right? Because they're too slow. Is Lucky Dime also going to be too slow? Like, I'm just going to outspeed you. Go ahead, develop your dimes. Like, I don't need to play a dime for free off Tamatoa. I'm going to win the game off Shark, Pirate's Life, and things like that, right? Like, I'm just outspeeding you. My deck is just more efficient. So yeah, like despite it being 4 Ruby Sapphires in the top cut, 3 of which made it to top. Wow, that's crazy. 3 of which made it to the top 4. Come on. He probably had to face a mirror. I was going to say, you couldn't beat the Ruby Amethyst player. I don't know if that was the matchup. I don't remember because I didn't see this one live. But yeah, congrats to the Ruby Amethyst player with an unconventional Ruby Amethyst deck making the top 4. But very different versions of Ruby Sapphire making its way through the top 8, basically. Let's take a look at this discard deck. So this one is, again, very traditional discard. Muses, only 2 with the Peats. Such an annoying deck to play against. Like I said, if they get set up, they're almost impossible to beat, but they're very fragile. And I think Zan showcased that in the LCCC from last set, where he just didn't see the cards he needed, and Artifacts ended up beating him in what was supposed to be a very good matchup for Zan, which I think it is a good matchup for the Emerald Steel player over the Emerald Amethyst player back then. But yeah, I think it was just the deck let him down. And I remember Morgan in the top 8, I think it was, not top 4, top 8 of the North American Championships. And it's like he had to make some plays just saying like, well, Emerald Steel is a deck that really just loses to itself. So he can't put the Emerald Steel player on having everything. So he has to just play his deck and just hope that, his line, is the one that will work against the Emerald Steel list, because the Emerald Steel player doesn't have the cards that directly just answer his board completely. And that's how you have to play against those decks, which is not a great way to play, in my opinion. Like, I don't want, like, it's a sucky feeling to feel that way, because you're like, if you do have that specific line of play against what I just did, I just lose the game automatically, and there's nothing I can do about it. Like, it's not even me as a player, it's just your deck single-handedly just trumps my deck because of the lines of play that we both have. So anyways, I'm getting off on a tangent here. I do want to take a look at this Emerald Amethyst list, because this one is a discard oriented version here, which is very interesting. This player got top something. Was it top 32? Top 16 with discard Emerald Amethyst. Maybe this is a deck that can make its way into the tier 2 of the meta. Using the new Dual Ink Diablo as well, which is kind of interesting. I like this list for the simple fact that you have a much better curve than the Emerald Steel list, where you have to play kind of awkward 1-drops still. This list, obviously Amethyst has the best 1-drops in the game. So, you solve that, you are able to sift through your deck easier. You're able to play Friends with Ursula, right? We don't see this interaction too much. So you don't need the Prince John redraw engine all that much off the discard. And then libraries as well. Pretty cool list. Anyways, guys, this video is probably super long. Hopefully you enjoyed and made it to the end. If you did, let me know in the comment section below. Thank you again for watching. Let me know what deck you're on or how you think the meta is going to shape up. But yeah, let's wrap it up there. Quantum is out.